Sayadaw Wunta, a living saint who, after building 6 pagodas around the world in 1983, said simply, "I am a fisherman casting the golden net of Buddha Dhamma in many far-off seas." Often the Sayadaw, traveling only with a few fellow monks, laboring himself on building projects that in Myanmar would have been done by others, the Sayadaw gave the gift of enlightened form to the West. The ability to communicate to Western students with few words was miraculous to hear. Often using Pali, the original spoken language of Buddha Sakyamuni, the Sayadaw would ground his listeners in actual Buddha Dhamma. I remember when Sayadaw was pointing out the stages of the path of awakening, not in a classroom or monastery, but a building site, where, pointing to his feet, he said, Sila, or morality, was for walking. Samadhi, meditation or concentration, was the body of the teaching, and Panya or wisdom was the head. Seeing Sayadaw's brief but funny parody of trying to walk without using his feet, one could not forget without proper morality there was no true meditation. Or, seeming to lift his head off his shoulders, he seemed to say, without a body, Samadhi, what would actual wisdom rest upon? But for the most part there were few words. Action and work gave birth to the reality of a true residing place of awakening, be it in pagodas or physical representations of the Buddha. Beginning with the clearing and leveling of the site to the initial prayers and invocations of the holy Sangha, both human and divine, the sheer physical work of pouring the square foundation, all were a direct corollary to the transformation that the Sayadaw was hoping for in each of the volunteers that helped in the construction. It was as if digging through the hard soil or finding out the foundation's forms were not level was a mirror of what was happening on the inner. Again, nothing said, just a slow but very direct insight. I remember at another time, as a pagoda's foundations was being created, the Sayadaw drawing the parallel in a few Pali words that without concentration, samadhi, that trying to practice insight, vipassana, was empty like the air of quick breathing. Without love, metta, as the foundation, the teaching, the pagoda could not unfold. Of course, as the pagoda progressed, the work became more skillful, demanding more awareness and cooperation. Again, the Sayadaw would instruct directly, pointing out the methods, even making the wooden tools that could transform concrete into flower petals, spiraling rings in the ornate symbolism of a pagoda. Sayadaw Thila was born on the full moon of June 28, 1912, in Wikalong village, Mon State, in Myanmar. His parents, Unyin and Da Tent, along with his grandparents Unu and Da Po, were the patrons of the local monastery. The Sayadaw was given the name Potaya, meaning one who loves the Dhamma. At the age of 15 he was ordained and given the name Thila, meaning one who has great sila or morality. 5 years later, in 1932, he became a fully ordained bhikkhu or monk. Practicing with great intensity, he laid the foundation with an understanding of the Tripitaka, the 3 baskets of teachings of the Buddha, along with the actual practice in bhavana, meditation or cultivation. From the oldest unbroken lineage of Buddha Dhamma on the planet, tracing its lineage right back to Sakyamuni himself, and the meeting with 2 Mon brothers, Sayadaw was given the traditional meditation subjects. The focus on nutriment, the composition of the 32 parts of the human body, the recollection of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and the other classical meditations outlined in the Visuddhimagga, or Path of Purity. The Sayadaw, with deep appreciation, cultivated the path of recollection of the awakened one, Buddha Anusati, combining with an overwhelming wish to perfect the Brahmaviharas, the path of metta, loving-kindness, karuna, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, and upeksha, the abiding in equanimity. Using the Pali word arahang, a word with multiple weavings of meanings, from purity to awakening. It is the first word used to describe the Buddha in the classical recollection, arahang samma sambuddho. Intent not on the elaboration, but on the very direct path of liberation. This arahang practice the Sayadaw has cultivated for over 85 years. No matter the surroundings, be it in the secluded reaches of Miramar or the busy city in the west, Sayadaw with his rosary continues this practice even today. Always the Sayadaw spoke little, but practiced much. As an outward form, the first pagoda was built by the Sayadaw on the second level of the 2,500-year-old Shwedagon, or Mountain of Gold Pagoda in Yangon. The Shwedagon Pagoda, according to oral tradition, was constructed on a hill overlooking the Irrawaddy River to house the hairs of the Buddha given to the Mon brothers. From a humble beginning under 20 feet tall, the Shwedagon has grown under the patronage of a succession of queens and kings until its present form of over 300 feet has been reached. The first pagoda, a replica of the first Shwedagon, the Sayadaw named the Pagoda of Good Wishes, which overcomes all disasters. Along with the innumerable wishes of great beings throughout history, no doubt this pagoda, built by the Sayadaw, helped to avoid damage to the Shwedagon Pagoda in World War II when Yangon was bombed. In Mandalay in November 1947, in front of the large Mahamuni statue, the Sayadaw met a student of the yogi saint Bo Ong Ming Gong. Spontaneous faith arose in the Sayadaw, and he made the determination to meet this great yogi. On November 21st, Sayadaw met and then received instructions from this great meditator near Popa. During an intensive retreat session, the Sayadaw received from Ong Mingong the instructions and clarifications of the signs or in Pali nimittas that had arisen in Sayadaw's practice. Requesting and receiving the blessings of the saint, Sayadaw continued his intensive retreat work, eventually returning to Yangon. In what was then the jungle to the west of the Shwedagon, a landowner, Upwanwe, after offering katina robes, showed Sayadaw the very old remains of a pagoda. He then requested that the Sayadaw accept and build a new pagoda on this ancient site from which many people had seen lights radiating from. At the conclusion of his retreat, the Sayadaw once again journeyed back to Popa to ask the advice of Ong Mingong. On Ong Mingong's advice, the Sayadaw accepted 5 acres and returned to Yangon and conferred with Upwanwe and his brother Upwanwang. Upwanwe's brothers, sisters, and the entire family supported the construction of the pagoda. The foundation was begun on January 13, 1949, and under auspicious circumstances the ancient relic chamber was found and placed in the new Datpon zone, along with relics placed by the Sayadaw. Thus the very literal meaning of Datpon zone, the coming together of the new and old Dat, or Datus, was made manifest. 30 years later, in the early 1980s, there were 174 pagodas. Now, close to 60 years from the original construction, there are more than 200 pagodas. But the Sayadaw for 5 years lived and meditated under a forest tree, receiving alms, teaching by his practice and presence, in a form that Sakyamuni Buddha would find remarkably similar to the practice 2,500 years ago. Only out of kindness to others would the Sayadaw accept the gift of a building, yet through the faith and generosity of the people of Miramar, this building for the Sangha has grown to over 300 feet, even being quickly rebuilt after a disastrous fire. What was once the secluded forest, where even tigers were seen, has become a part of the busy city of Yangon. Yet in the midst of this development, there is an oasis where people can and do meditate daily. If you visit Datpon zone, you see the outer Sayadaw in so many roles. To the Sangha, the Sayadaw is the abbot of the monastery, giving direction and insight, both scriptural and, most important, advice on the path of meditation itself. Not by one who just knows meditation manuals, but one who knows from actually walking the path, who in truth is the actual practice. And equally marvelous, knows how the path of liberation, through unchanging in essence, adapts to the modern world of East and West. To the many lay supporters and visitors to Datpon zone, the Sayadaw is often like the kind grandfather, both encouraging and correcting, often using humor to allow the person to see themselves in the correct path. As a basis of merit for many, Sayadaw Thila Wunta accepts the spontaneous generosity, both large and small, of the community. Each evening, the Sangha of Dat Zone, led by the Sayadaw, chant a Pali Puja for the benefit of the many. All are welcome to attend, and often the Sayadaw's many cats just seem to show up. At the end of the chanting, there is a brief period of silent meditation. In the mid-1950s, the Sayadaw met seemingly by chance a New Yorker, Mr. Gus Ruggieri, who, while on vacation in Miramar, invited him to visit the West. Later, Mr. Ruggieri remembered that at the time he thought that the chance of a monk from Miramar actually visiting the U.S. was quite slim. Of course, he perhaps did not quite realize the power of the Sayadaw's prayers and determination. The first stage of the journey was via ship to London. While staying at the Buddhist Society monastery, Sayadaw Thila Wunta, fortuitously for so many students in the West, met a young Canadian, George Dawson. The Sayadaw, who was accompanied by another bhikkhu, U Adisaransi, after giving a series of Dhamma discourses to the students and faculty of the University of Buffalo, began work on the first pagoda built, the American Shwedagon, which was begun on May 30th. At less than 10 feet tall, it was by oral tradition the size of the first Shwedagon built so many years ago in Miramar. In 1982, this same pagoda in Olean, New York, was rebuilt by the Sayadaw, accompanied by 20 students from the Dharma Center of Canada, to a height of 21 feet. Upon the Sayadaw's arrival back in London, on his return to Miramar, he once again met the young Canadian George Dawson and requested ordination in the Buddhist Sangha. Plans were made for Mr. Dawson to meet Sayadaw in India in October. During the Sayadaw's final week of a 49-day retreat at Bodhgaya, the place of enlightenment of the Buddha, George Dawson was ordained by the Sayadaw as a novice and was given the name of Ananda Bodhi, the bliss of knowing awakening. Ananda Bodhi, who accompanied the Sayadaw to Miramar, was given full ordination at the great ordination hall at the south gate of the Shwedagon Pagoda on December 21st, 1958. For us students of Ananda Bodhi in the West, his meeting and ordination by the Sayadaw was the crucial bridge which brought the teachings to us. It is said that through the kindness of the teacher, the teaching of the Buddha is received by the student. Without the Sayadaw's great wish to share the Buddha Dhamma with all beings, meeting and uniting with the great faith of Ananda Bodhi and the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, the disciples of both, the Sangha, would not have had the opportunity to flourish. Only the enlightened ones can understand the nuance of the kusala, or meritorious karma, which leads to such benefits for so many. From 1959 to 1981, besides constructing and enlarging the pagodas and monastery of Datpon Zone, the Sayadaw constructed at various sites throughout Myanmar more than 20 additional pagodas. For some, Sayadaw was asked to supervise construction only after severe obstacles had arisen blocking their construction. Sayadaw, using determined skills combined with a great loving kindness, seemed to transform these obstacles through his prayers, ensuring the successful completion. In April 1982, accepting the invitation of the students of Ananda Bodhi, Sayadaw returned to the West. For us students, it was like meeting a grandfather that we'd only heard of. Yet, Sayadaw Thila Wunta's great wish to help Buddha Dhamma be established in new lands quickly bore fruit. In Boise, Idaho, Sayadaw built a jewel-like pagoda in the forest. At the Dhamma Center of Canada, a center of over 400 acres, founded by Ananda Bodhi in the 1960s, the Sayadaw built the second pagoda of the trip. Finding that the original pagoda in New York needed repair, Sayadaw's great kindness inspired more than 20 students to spontaneously accompany him to rebuild it. Camping in the woods, working from sunup to sundown, it took only 8 days to completely rebuild and double its size. Again and again, the Sayadaw was able to overcome all obstacles with his determined faith in Buddha Dhamma. Continuing onto the west coast of Canada, on the island of Galiano, Sayadaw built in September the second Canadian pagoda. Yet the Sayadaw did not stop, continuing in November onto New Zealand, journeying to the South Island, where at Wongapeka another pagoda was built. Continuing to circle the globe, a pagoda was built outside of Adelaide in February 1983. Each day, Sayadaw would instruct and work at the building site, this when he was over 70 years of age, encouraging all he met to take part on the inner and outer journey of refinement. I remember Sayadaw pointing out that it's small loba, small greed to want one car or house or even to want 5 houses. That was nothing much. Sayadaw said, referring to himself, the Sayadaw has big loba, mahaloba, the wish to share the teaching of the Buddha with all beings, to build pagodas in many countries for the happiness of all. This was Sayadaw's way to point out that we had to give up our small wishes, which were often only causing suffering, for the loba of wishing for liberation. Sayadaw on his travels would meet people who would question him on the path of the elders, the Theravadan, which has often been misnamed the Hinayana, or small vehicle, versus the big vehicle, or Mahayana. The Sayadaw never won for many words or philosophical second-hand debate. At one point said simply, "First you have to have a car, attain liberation. Then you will be able to give others a ride in it. Before that, it was just empty talk." Yet the Sayadaw did not stop. Even this very year, 2007, the Sayadaw, at over 90 years old, has journeyed to Brazil and South America to oversee the construction of a new pagoda, thus complementing pagodas built in Europe and South Africa in the intervening years. Sayadaw even returned to North America, building a pagoda near Winnipeg and constructing a large Buddha Rupa, once again at the Dharma Center of Canada.